understand the theme of this year's Alumni Day is STEAM, an exploration. While my talk is not on STEAM, it is very much about exploration of issues that are close to my heart. I still remember the day when I learned that a brave Pakistani young woman was shot by the Taliban for demanding that she and other girls have access to education. She demanded fiercely and boldly that all young girls and women should have access to education, and that education is a fundamental human right. That young woman is Malala Yousafzai, who is now a household name and went on to be the youngest person ever to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. When I think of Malala, I think of what great risks she undertook to ensure that she and other girls had access to the educational opportunities that some of us in the West take for granted. I think about how much courage it must have taken to literally put one's life on the line for the sake of this intrinsic and basic human right. I can think of no better example than York House to illustrate exactly the kind of place where girls are encouraged to achieve their full potential, not only in academics, but in every realm of their lives. I joined York House in grade 6 in Mrs. Addison's 6E class, and while I experienced a few growing pains transitioning from the public school system, my classmates and teachers made me feel so welcomed and made me feel that this is a place where I truly belong. It was at York House where I learned how to think critically about global issues and to question what was going on in the world around me and how I could play a part in alleviating suffering and injustice. York House provided me with an opportunity to participate in the Duke of Edinburgh's awards program, and part of this involved an expedition. I reluctantly agreed to sign up to travel to Peru with a small group of students and teachers, to stay with a homestay family in a small Spanish-speaking town, and to hike the famous Inca Trail. While I was nervous initially, I stepped aboard that plane to Peru with courage, knowing that this would be a life-changing adventure. And I wasn't wrong. When we arrived in Peru, I was blown away by the warmth and hospitality of my host family. I was amazed at their patience and kindness as I fumbled through my rudimentary Spanish and flipped frantically through my Spanish-English dictionary. When I look back and think about my trip to Peru, however, it isn't my host family or the breathtaking views and ancient ruins of the Inca Trail that stick out in my mind. It is the poverty I witnessed firsthand in South America that stands out for me the most. This trip to Peru in grade 11 was the first time I was pushed way outside my comfort zone, and where I first became aware of the poverty and marginalization that people experience on such a widespread scale. In Peru, we volunteered for a day at a care facility for abandoned children. The majority of these children had been left on the streets by families unable to care for them, and these children had various disabilities and complex medical needs. I remember being shocked and saddened by the number of vulnerable children at this facility, crying and being cramped into tight and unsanitary quarters. Most of them had experienced vast neglect and didn't know how to give or receive affection. That trip to Peru with York House was not only eye-opening, but transformative in terms of my life trajectory and mission. That trip prompted a massive reflection and unlearning that truly highlighted for me what I would like to devote the rest of my life to. Unlike Malala, I did not have to fight for my access to education. Yes, I had to take a difficult entrance exam, but my access to education was comparatively easy and seamless. Unlike many young women and girls across the globe, I was not forced to walk in bare feet in the blazing sun for several hours to access the nearest school. I began to realize what an incredible and rare gift it was to have access to the type of education I had, to be able to attend York House, where my parents drove me to school each day, and where I had access to teachers that cared about me, and numerous extracurricular activities that I could participate in. So few girls have this privilege, and while I was never forced to fight for my right to be educated, I was determined to fight for those that couldn't, just like Malala. Malala's work for gender equality inspired me to create AWARE, a grassroots feminist organization that brought together young women from diverse backgrounds to grow and learn together and to share their life experiences and leadership skills. As women, it is imperative that we stick up for each other, that we band together and advocate for each other while overtly challenging the systems that continue to oppress and silence us. Like Malala says, we realize the importance of our voices only when we are silenced. AWARE was thus created for young women to recognize the power of our own voices, both individually and collectively, and to know that even one strong voice can make a world of difference when it comes to dismantling the injustice and oppression that keep girls from achieving their full potential and accessing the full spectrum of their human rights. I remember for my 16th birthday, my parents gifted me a book of poetry by Maya Angelou. An accomplished civil rights activist, I am incredibly inspired by Maya Angelou's writing, and to this day, she continues to be one of my favorite poets. In her renowned poem, Still I Rise, she writes, "You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise." So in closing, my message to all the Yorkies and alumni out there listening, from the youngest to the oldest, is to not be afraid to raise up your voice and rise up to the challenge of speaking out for your generation of women and the generation of women and girls to come. Do not be afraid to interrogate, disrupt, and ultimately dismantle those structures and systems that oppress others on the basis of race, class, culture, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Do not be afraid to question, to critique, and to examine your own privilege or to ask yourself, how can I do more? Finally, I encourage all of you to remember that poverty and injustice are not phenomena that just happen abroad or someplace far away. Injustice is happening all around us, right here, right now, and in our own backyard. And there is always an opportunity to get involved in breaking that cycle. I encourage you to draw parallels between conflict overseas and the opioid crisis happening here in BC, to see the links between child labor in South America and the long-standing colonization and abuse of First Nations land and communities here in Canada. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to use your voices to lift up the voices of others, and to use your voices to inspire and encourage others to be strong enough to speak up for themselves. As Malala described so eloquently, we raise up our voices, not so that we can shout, but so that those without a voice can be heard. We cannot succeed when half of us are held back. Remember, as in Malala Yousafzai's example, that all it takes is one voice to create change. All it takes is one brave girl or woman to speak out and rise up. As Maya Angelou so eloquently puts it, just like the moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like the hopes springing high, still I'll rise. Now, more than ever, it is important to rise, 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 and not stop rising. In closing, I would like to thank the York House Alumnae Association for bestowing on me this very prestigious award, and for allowing me to share the impact that my time at York House has had on my life. Thank you.